Chapter 402. Some people had the same symptoms as the early stage of AIDS, but it was not necessarily AIDS. AIDS must be tested. Behind her, Li Xiqing woke up again. Startled, Su Qianxi exited the browser and immediately deleted her browsing history. She put the phone aside. He turned around and looked at her. In the dark, he looked even more mysterious. Su Qianxi saw it and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong?" Li Xiqing did not answer. He leaned over, put his leg on her, and closed his eyes comfortably. Being hugged, Su Qianxi also nestled in his arms, staring at his chest motionlessly. She stayed awake for most of the night and did not fall asleep until after midnight. When she woke up, Li Xiqing was already gone. After washing up, she walked out and found that he had been working in the study early in the morning. He was so busy that he could fly. Su Qianxi did not want to disturb him and went downstairs for breakfast. There was a parking space on campus, but it would be too eye-catching to drive to school. Su Qianxi took a taxi and went to school. It was the end of the semester, and her studies were very busy. Su Qianxi had asked for a few days off because of her illness and missed many classes. After a day of classes, Su Qianxi was still studying in the library. Her phone rang. It was Li Xiqing. "Still in class?" "Yes, I'm studying. I promised Grandpa that I would take you there today." Su Qianxi had completely forgotten about it. Now that he reminded her, she suddenly felt like she had just woken up from a dream. She nodded, packed up her books, and rushed out with her backpack. At the school gate, she immediately saw the Bugatti surrounded by a lot of people. Seeing Su Qianxi walking toward the car, many people knew who it was. "It's Mr. Li. Wow, a rich guy is so different. He changed his Maybach to this car. Wow, when can I afford it? This car costs more than 20 million. Su Qianxi blushed, opened the passenger door, and got in. Li Xiqing took her backpack, which was heavy. "Are you done?" she asked. "Yeah." Li Xiqing started the car and drove toward the old house. On the day of Grandpa's birthday party, Ming sent out the peach. "He said you made it yourself." She looked at him and asked, "How did Grandpa react?" "I'm very surprised. I've finished all of them." She couldn't help chuckling. "Really? Can Grandpa finish such a big longevity peach by himself? Really?" Li Xiqing couldn't help but curl his lips. Ming said that he had never seen an old man who could eat so much. Su Qianxi laughed. Thinking of Grandpa's kind face, her heart was slightly warm. In this world, before Li Xiqing, Grandpa was the only person who treated her well. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror and found that although she was smiling, she did not seem to be in a good mood. Or rather, it had been like this for the past few days. She looked normal, but one could see that she was troubled. "Mrs. Li, I'm your husband. If you have any unhappy things, you can tell me. Don't keep it to yourself. It's not good for your health." "Okay. Don't you have anything to say to me?" Su Qianxi was dazed and looked at him. He had lost weight recently. Chapter 403. Their eyes met. His eyes were bright and deep, with sharp insight. Su Qianxi felt that she had nowhere to hide in front of him. Quickly looking away, she shook her head. "No." Li Xiqing pursed his lips and did not ask more, driving quietly. He could see that she was in a bad mood. If he asked more, it would only be counterproductive. When they arrived at the old house, it was time for dinner. Lu saw them coming from a distance and greeted them with a basin of water. She complained, "Why did you come back so late? Today is the New Year's Eve. Come and get rid of the bad luck. God bless us." Lu dipped a stick of mugwort in the water and threw it at them. There were grains and charms in the basin. Su Qianxi and Li Xiqing stood at the door after Lu threw the water at them. Captain Li saw Su Qianxi coming in and felt sorry for her. He said, "Oh, Qianqian, how did you lose so much weight? Su Qianxi was dazed. Had she lost weight? She couldn't help but think of a characteristic of AIDS, extreme thinness. Grandpa could tell at a glance that she had lost weight. How skinny was she? Su Qianxi touched her face and looked at Li Xiqing behind her. Qin Shuhua saw Li Xiqing and said to her father-in-law, "Xiqing is the one who has lost a lot of weight. He has been in the hospital with Su Qianxi for the past 2 days. The company is so busy." "Dad, you are too biased. Qianqian is a girl. This boy is so tenacious. He fell from the mountain when he was a child and did not die. He will not starve to death." Su Qianxi was shocked. Fell from the mountain? When Qin Shuhua heard this, her expression changed dramatically. Li Xiqing went up and patted her on the shoulder. "It's okay. It's all over." Qin Shuhua gritted her teeth and did not respond. She turned around and walked in. Seeing Qin Shuhua like this, Li Xiqing looked at Captain Li with some blame. Grandpa knew he had said something wrong and shut up. Su Qianxi was very curious, but seeing their expressions, she did not ask more. She would ask him at night. After chatting with Grandpa for a while, the family went to the table. Li Beixing and Li Jinnan didn't go home. Lu Sa had prepared a table full of delicious food, but not many people were eating. Qin Shuhua picked food for Li Xiao, Captain Li, and Li Xiqing. Su Qianxi ate silently and did not speak. However, she never expected that Qin Shuhua would pick food for her as well. Su Qianxi was flattered and looked at Qin Shuhua. Qin Shuhua looked a bit embarrassed, but when she saw Li Zhao's eyes, she still said, "Qianxi, I used to be obsessed and thought Tang Menjing was good. Now I know what kind of person Tang Menjing is. I have been fooled for a long time. It must have been hard on you. I thought Tang Menjing's child was really Xiqing's. After all, it was a paternity test. I didn't know she could fake something like that. It was my fault. Qianxi, forgive me, okay?" Su Qianxi was a bit scared and looked at Li Xiqing helplessly. He looked at her, his eyes deep. "Mom is talking to you." Su Qianxi suddenly came to herself and whispered, "Mom. I never blamed you." Chapter 404. She looked down and nodded. "Yes." After dinner, Captain Li took out the couplets he had written early in the morning, as well as the window decorations that Lu Sa and Qin Shuhua had cut in the past few days. He threw all of them to Li Xiqing and said, "Don't think that you can be lazy just because you came back so late. Go and paste them all for me. Don't miss any." He smiled and took it. Su Qianxi went forward to take some curtains and went to help with the glue. Su Qianxi felt it was a bit difficult to stick them in each room. She felt that her body was getting worse. If it was in the past, she definitely wouldn't be so tired. By the time he was done, 2 hours had already passed. Grandpa asked them to stay at the old house, and Su Qianxi had no objection. However, Li Xiqing had something to deal with and left in a hurry. She was lying in the room alone, staring at the ceiling. It was a silent night. Li Xiqing was scheduled to fly in the afternoon, but he went to Italy in the morning. After the Lunar New Year, Su Qianxi joined the exam team. After the exam, she felt even more exhausted. A few days later, Su Qianxi came to a small hospital far away from them, which had a very good reputation online. Not daring to drive, she took a taxi. Wearing sunglasses and a hat, she checked herself into the infectious disease department, drew her blood, and sat quietly outside. "Dr. Lu, are you sure it is? Did my son really get AIDS?" A woman's voice trembled. Listening to the voice, Su Qianxi did not hesitate. As long as Dr. Lu said yes, the woman would immediately break down and cry. Dr. Lu's voice was very low, and Su Qianxi could not hear what he said, but the woman immediately cried, "Damn it, my son is still so young. What should I do?" Soon, the woman walked out, weeping in despair. She was even more nervous. When it was her turn, she walked in and sat in front of the doctor. The name on the card was Lu Quan, which somehow made Su Qianxi feel familiar. Looking up, she saw a very young man wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. When he saw her, his eyes were a bit obscure. "Take off your sunglasses," said Lu Quan. Su Qianxi heard that and took off her sunglasses, revealing her small face. Lu Quan saw her face and raised his eyebrows. It was really her? After looking at her medical record, Lu Quan asked, "You suspect that you have AIDS?" Su Qianxi shrank back and nodded. "Why?" "I might have been raped by an AIDS patient," Su Qingsang said. "Are you wearing a condom?" "I don't know." "Are you sure he raped you?" The man's words were too sharp. Su Qianxi's eyes turned red as she shook her head. "I'm not sure. I was knocked out, but when I woke up, my body was in pain, and I had a fever of about 40 degrees. "Oh, then he must be infected with AIDS." Lu Quan threw the medical record aside, leaned back on the chair, yawned, and said, "The probability of HIV transmission is most likely through sexual intercourse. In this case, have you slept with your husband?" Su Qianxi's heart was stabbed, and her tears suddenly fell. She shook her head and choked, "No." Chapter 405. However, she quickly thought of what she had read online and asked, "Didn't they say it would take 6 weeks to get the results?" There was a trace of regret in Lu Quan's eyes, but when he saw her tears, he felt a sense of satisfaction. However, he quickly put on a sympathetic expression. "It's probably still in the incubation period, so it's not shown on the report. But you're already in this situation, so you'll definitely be infected. You should go back and prepare." She couldn't help crying. "What should I do? I don't want to die yet." "There's nothing you can do if you don't want to die. Who told you to do it with someone?" Lu Quan shrugged helplessly. "All right, don't cry. I advise you to go back now and confess to your husband. Let's see how we can resolve this." How dare she? How dare she? Tell him that she had been raped and that she might even have AIDS? Or could it be that he already knew? She stood up and walked out, and Lu Quan couldn't help laughing. Picking up his cell phone, he called his sister Lu Anan. She quickly picked up. "Hello? Hey, Anan, I helped you get revenge. How are you going to thank me?" When Su Qianxi got home, she did not even eat and just hid in her room crying. Nanny Rong was terrified, but Su Qianxi would not open the door no matter how hard she knocked. After crying for a long time, Su Qianxi fell asleep. When she was half asleep, she felt someone was taking off her clothes. Su Qianxi suddenly woke up and grabbed the hand. Startled by her sudden movement, he quickly helped her up and took off her coat. "I heard from Nanny Rong that you haven't eaten yet?" His voice was low and deep, sounding tired. It was not hard to tell that he had come back in a hurry. It was the 4th day of his business trip. Su Qianxi pursed her lips and burst into tears again. He wiped her tears away and said helplessly, "Why are you crying?" She wiped her tears on her sleeves and threw herself into his arms, sobbing. Li Xiqing let her cry, reached out to touch her hair, pulled her up, held her face, and bent down to look at her. "What's wrong? Did you suffer outside?" She shook her head and gritted her teeth, crying so hard that her nose was running. Li Xiqing chuckled and took 2 tissues from the bed to wipe away her snot. "You look so ugly. I can't bear to look at you." She blushed and looked away, wiping away her tears and snot before saying, "Mr. Li, He took off his jacket, threw it on the sofa, leaned toward her, and looked at her. "What do you want to say?" Su Qianxi's eyes became red again. Li Xiqing sighed, hugged her, and said, "It's too cold outside. It's more comfortable to hug my wife." Su Qianxi blinked, and his lips were already on hers. The kiss went from shallow to deep. Su Qianxi's heart pounded, and she hugged him. He hugged her and pushed her onto the bed. Lifting her sweater with his big hand, he reached under her clothes, breathing faster and faster. She suddenly thought of something, raised her head, and shouted, "No." Chapter 406. Su Qianxi's clothes were taken off very quickly. Blushing, she still gritted her teeth and refused. No, no. Why? He stopped and looked at her. Su Qianxi stuttered, her heart palpitating. When the words were on the tip of her tongue, her tears fell again, and she burst into tears. Li Xiqing was confused by her crying, so he stopped asking and leaned over to press her down. Su Qianxi only had a pair of bottoms left, and nothing else, just her underwear. Li Xiqing reached in and unbuckled her bra. She shrank back, trying to push his hand away, but he was even more aggressive. Spreading her legs with his thighs, he put his knee between her legs and whispered, "I'm more excited when you do this." Su Qianxi suddenly stopped moving. Li Xiqing curled his lips and kissed her neck sincerely. Every touch was like a feather, gently tickling her all the way to her heart. Su Qianxi burst into tears again. Choking, she said, "Mr. Li, Her soft voice made Li Xiqing's already restless beast even more uncontrollable. He moved forward and gently rubbed her neck through her clothes. Su Qianxi clearly sensed him and shrank back. Panting and scared, she whispered, "Let's get a divorce." Li Xiqing narrowed his eyes, feeling dangerous. Lowering his head, the tip of his nose against the tip of his nose, they looked at each other. What's the reason this time? Li Xiqing was really angry. Looking at her, he felt she was a naughty child. "If you say that too much, it will no longer be romantic, Mrs. Li." Su Qianxi burst into more tears. Putting her hand on his chest, she said, However, he obviously did not want to hear her out. He kissed her lips, unzipped her pants, and pulled them down. Su Qianxi struggled even harder, but he was so aggressive that she could not fight back at all. Crying even harder, Su Qianxi finally couldn't take it anymore and said loudly, "Mr. Li, I was raped." "Do you know that?" Li Xiqing paused and suddenly composed himself. His eyes were like that of an ancient beast, dangerous. "What did you say?" She burst into tears, desperate to the extreme. Under him, she was so wrong that she could not speak. He let go of her and helped her up. Wiping away her tears, he asked in a low and dangerous voice, "Who is it?" "During my business trip?" She sobbed hard, unable to say a word. "Louis Han?" Li Xiqing said what he was thinking, and his heart sank. Hearing that, Su Qianxi stopped crying, took his hand, and shook her head. No, who is that?" Other than Louis Han, Li Xiqing could not think of anyone else with such a motive and courage. She sniffled, and he suppressed his impatience, took 2 tissues, and wiped her tears. Chapter 407. Li Xiqing looked at her and suddenly laughed. He asked in a deep voice, "Which hospital are you from?" Su Qianxi shuddered and stopped crying. "You went to the mental hospital, right?" Gritting his teeth, Li Xiqing poked her head with his finger. "How can you be so stupid? What's in your head? Was your brain filled with water when you were a child?" She felt wronged and cried even harder. She slapped him on the shoulder and yelled, "You are stupid. You are the one with water in your head." He felt angry and amused. He grabbed her hand and pushed her down again. Ignoring the tears and snot on her face, he lowered his head and kissed her hard. The unexpected kiss made Su Qianxi struggle even more. Angrily, she patted his back. She had said she had AIDS. Why did he still kiss her? Why did he still kiss her? Didn't he know it was contagious? Su Qianxi was very angry, but she couldn't help feeling sad and wronged. Her heart seemed to be grasped by him, aching so much that tears kept falling. She didn't want to die yet. She didn't want him to be infected by her and die with her. However, she couldn't break free. He took the air from her mouth, moved his lips down, and bit her collarbone. She cried, "Li Xiqing, you pervert. Don't touch me. Don't bite me. You are a pervert, and a stupid little pervert." Li Xiqing was disappointed and bit her collarbone harder, making her cry out, "It hurts. You know it hurts?" Huh. In the end, Li Xiqing still couldn't bear to do it too harshly. Kissing her on the lips, he turned her face to look at him. Tell me, how could such a smart person like me be defeated by you? Su Qianxi felt insulted and gave him a stare. What did he mean? Was he saying she was stupid? Not convinced? He felt angry and amused. Gritting his teeth, he said, if you are not convinced, then don't be so stupid in the future. Do you think you were raped by that girl with AIDS? Su Qianxi pursed her lips and almost cried her heart out. That person did take the medicine, but when I went over, he hadn't completely acted up. It was only after I beat the old woman up that he acted up. She stared at him incredulously and blurted out, you hit a woman? Li Xiqing was speechless. He glanced at her gloomily and said matter-of-factly, in that kind of situation, it would be good if I didn't kill her. And then? Then the medicine took effect on the monkey. I gave the old woman to him. Su Qianxi's eyes widened. She wanted to say something, but her voice was drowned out by a sob. He wanted to teach her a lesson, but seeing her crying like this, he suddenly felt reluctant. Annoyed, he got up and took a few tissues to wipe her tears. Annoyed and depressed, he said, do you know how pigs die? Su Qianxi reached out and pushed him hard, angry. Li Xiqing leaned down again and whispered, are you angry? Su Qianxi looked away and tried to recall in her mind. Li Xiqing chuckled. Don't you know if you've ever been touched by anyone? Chapter 408. When I woke up, I had such a high fever, and my whole body was in pain. She sounded aggrieved. And you made love to me for so long the day before, and I still hurt there. Who knows if it was you or someone else? Li Xiqing said. So it's my fault? It's your fault. Su Qianxi yelled angrily and stared at him with a red face, seeming that if he did not admit his mistake, she would cry. Li Xiqing chuckled and said, okay, it's my fault. Perfunctory. However, she looked away and couldn't help smiling. Li Xiqing looked at her and whispered, you're not crying anymore? Su Qianxi looked away, avoiding his face. He leaned in again and was about to kiss her. She looked away in disgust and turned her head away. He leaned in again, and she avoided again. This time, he did not manage to kiss her. Not kissing her, he lowered his head and kissed her on the neck, making her exclaim. I feel bad, he complained, grabbing her hand and touching it. I've been without food for so long. It's time to give me some benefits, Mrs. Li, wait a minute. She pushed him. But when I was in a coma, I felt someone was taking off my clothes. That was definitely not an illusion. Li Xiqing paused and said calmly, probably not. It should be Rong Haiyue. Him? Taking off my clothes? Yes, he picked you up from the water and took off your sweater and coat. He was injured at that time. Although he was not very happy, taking off the sweater and coat did save a lot of energy. Oh. She understood. He saved me. I know. She shivered sensitively. He kissed her and said in a low voice, when the new year, we will go to the capital to visit and thank him. Okay. Ah. Don't touch there, what about here? He pulled down her pants and took off her clothes. He couldn't wait to get rid of the restraints on his body. Su Qianxi felt a bit cold because of the wind caused by his movements. She reached for the quilt and covered him with it. Su Qianxi flinched and thought of something. She asked, where is Tang Mengqing? Tang Zhenghao fled with the money, Mrs. Tang was in jail, and Tang Menjing was behaving like that. Where was Tang Mengqing? She lives at my uncle's house. He leaned against her. She is good friends with Wei Ya. Oh, you still have the mood to think about others? He folded her legs and rubbed them gently. She still found it hard to believe. Pushing him, she asked, are you sure what you said is true? I wasn't. Li Xiqing was speechless. Taking her hand away, he bent over and whispered, now I do. Su Qianxi groaned and looked annoyed when she heard that. Pushing him away, she said, "You bad guy. Don't you like it, huh?" Li Xiqing's voice rose slightly. "No. Ah." Chapter 409. Gritting his teeth, he put on his clothes and picked her up without saying a word. Feeling guilty, she looked at him weakly and grabbed his collar like a child who had done something wrong. She whispered, "I can walk by myself." "Shut up." Li Xiqing was very annoyed. He carried her downstairs, took his car keys and wallet, and walked her to his car. Su Qianxi did not say anything. She heard that a man with an insatiable appetite was the worst. Although he felt wronged, he was still rational. Gently putting her in the passenger seat, he went to the driver's seat and sat down. However, he was not in a hurry to start the car. He took out a pack of cigarettes, lit one, and took a long drag before he started the car. Feeling better, Su Qianxi looked at the night view outside the window and felt a bit dazed. It seemed like a long time since she came back to life. She felt like she was dreaming. Su Qianxi looked out the window for a long time before looking at him. With the cigarette in his mouth, Li Xiqing noticed her gaze, glanced at her, took the cigarette, and blew out a long smoke. In the winter night, the white smoke shrouded his face, making his originally delicate and tough facial features appear even colder and more distinct. They were silent the whole way. When they arrived at the hospital closest to Yuxiu Hospital, it was more than 10 minutes later. The burning desire was mostly gone in the cold wind of the winter night. He wanted to carry her out of the car, but she thought it was too embarrassing and insisted on walking on her own. He had to give up and take her to the gynecological emergency department. After a series of tests, the doctor looked at her with a strange expression and asked, "When did you find your stomach uncomfortable?" Su Qianxi blushed and told the truth. The doctor pushed up his glasses and asked, "When was your last period?" More than 20 days ago." "Is your period usually accurate?" "Yes, it's either a day earlier or a day later, okay." The doctor nodded and said a name that Su Qianxi did not understand to a nurse not far away. Soon, the nurse left. When the doctor came back, he handed a box to Su Qianxi. "Go and try it." Seeing the name on it, Su Qianxi was dumbfounded. "Pregnancy test?" She went to the bathroom and used it according to the nurse's instructions. Looking at the 2 red lines, she was a bit dazed and took out 2 more. There were a total of 3 test papers, 2 positive and 1 weak positive. She didn't know how she got out of the bathroom. Seeing him walking over, she blinked and called, "Honey." Li Xiqing looked at her. "Yes?" He smelled like tobacco. Obviously, he had smoked again. Hearing his response, she suddenly screamed and threw herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Honey, honey, honey." Li Xiqing's first reaction was to hold her in his arms. Lowering his head, he asked in a low voice, "What's wrong?" She hugged him tightly and then suddenly let go of him. Holding his hand excitedly, she said with a serious face, "I have something very important to tell you." Li Xiqing raised an eyebrow and looked at her hand. She hid it behind her and pretended to be unhappy. "What happened?" He reached out and was about to grab her hand. She dodged and said, "Don't move. Stand there." "Okay." He stopped moving and looked at her. She took out a pregnancy test, waved it in front of him and asked, "Do you know what this is?" Chapter 410. Hearing that, Su Qianxi's good mood suddenly disappeared. She reached out and punched him. Li Xiqing's cold and deep eyes became softer, holding her fist. Su Qianxi's punch missed, and she kicked him with her foot. This time, Li Xiqing did not avoid it. His eyes were full of joy, and his face was always cold. He reached out and pulled her over, taking out the test papers behind her. The 3 objects and the bright red line stimulated Li Xiqing's vision. His lips became wider and wider. Su Qianxi was a bit annoyed and hit his chest. "You are so ignorant. You have short hair and short vision." Li Xiqing hugged her from behind, looked down at her face, and whispered, "Well, I don't see that this is a pregnancy test at all." When Su Qianxi heard that, the unhappiness on her face disappeared instantly. She reached out and pinched his face, saying angrily, "You are playing with me." Li Xiqing's smile became wider and wider, holding her hand, and whispered, "You played with me first, Mrs. Li." Seeing his rare smile, Su Qianxi chuckled, wrinkled her nose, and looked disgusted. "Go away. Did you already know? I just saw the nurse go to get the pregnancy test paper." "No wonder." Su Qianxi was a bit disappointed and pushed him. "Can't you pretend to be surprised by me?" "Why do I have to pretend?" Li Xiqing's eyes were sparkling, as if he wanted to suck her in. He couldn't help putting his hand on her lower abdomen. Su Qianxi smiled happily and took his hand away. "Go away, I'm going to see the doctor." "Okay." Li Xiqing watched her walk into the clinic, and his forced calmness finally broke. He clenched his fists and hit his thigh hard, feeling that he was going crazy. She was pregnant, she was pregnant. He was going to be a father, he was going to be a father. The sudden surprise made Li Xiqing's heart beat faster and faster, and he almost couldn't help cheering. Under the strange gaze of the people around him, Li Xiqing picked up his phone, hid in the hospital stairwell, and immediately called his good friend. At 10:00 in the evening, Ming took a box of condoms he had just bought and hid in the bathroom. He held a sterilized needle that he had asked his subordinate to take from the hospital and poked it. Suddenly, a voice rang out, and Ming was startled. When he realized it was his phone, he breathed a sigh of relief. "My goodness, I really can't do bad things. Once I do bad things, I'll feel guilty." Rubbing the lubrication from the condom, Ming took out his phone from his pocket. After seeing it was Li Xiqing, he felt a little bored. This guy had been too happy recently. He didn't want to see him. Hang up. Lowering his head, he continued poking and poking. However, Li Xiqing did not give up, and his phone rang again. Despite his impatience, Ming picked up the phone. "Hello?" "Ha ha ha ha." Ming. Ming shivered and looked at the caller. F***CK, was it really Li Xiqing? "Did you see a ghost?" Ming wasn't in a good mood. He put the condom back into the box. "You're smiling like that. If I didn't know better, I would have thought you were going to give birth." Hearing that, Li Xiqing couldn't help laughing. Ming shivered and hung up the phone without hesitation. When this guy laughed, it was either a good thing or a bad thing. Listening to his retarded laughter, there was no doubt that it was a good thing. Chapter 411. If it was something bad, he would definitely be very interested. The phone rang for the third time, and Ming directly hung up. After dealing with that evidence, he slowly put the condoms in his pocket. After finding that Yu Lily was still sleeping, he secretly put them where he usually put them. Very quietly, very quietly. The familiar voice woke Yu Lily up from her sleep. Seeing Yu Lily's astonished look, he pretended to be indifferent, closed the drawer, stood up, and said indifferently, "Replenish the national treasury. It's used up." Yu Lily's eyes were filled with shock. Yu Lily didn't know what to say. Yu Lily gave him a big look. "You want to do it again? How can I not kill you?" Ming heard that and directly rushed over, smiling wickedly. "Are you willing to do it?" F***CK off. Yu Lily did not give him any face and directly lifted her foot to kick him away. "Answer the phone. It's so noisy." Being kicked away, Ming breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that this woman did not suspect anything. I was scared to death. Picking up the phone, Ming was impatient. "I say, Lao Air, don't be crazy in the middle of the night. It will affect the city. My wife is pregnant." Ming was speechless. 100,000 critical hits. "My wife is pregnant. My wife is pregnant. My wife is pregnant." Ming was speechless. "Did you hear that? My wife is pregnant." "Oh, Ha ha. Idiot. Oh Ming did not want to listen and directly hung up. Yu Lily saw his sneer and asked curiously, "Why is Li Xiqing looking for you?" He said that his wife is pregnant. Yu Lily heard that and asked, "Isn't that a good thing? Why are you scolding him?" "I don't have a wife. I don't even have a pregnant one." Oh Ming's face was full of resentment. He directly rushed over and kissed Yu Lily. Yu Lily struggled hard and scolded, "Hey, Oh Ming, you promised to do it twice. If you do this again, I won't play with you anymore. I'm telling you." Oh Ming was honest. He got up, pressed her down, turned her over, and let her lie down. "Go to sleep. Don't touch me. F***ck, you even kissed her. Go away, go away, go away." Ah, the one with the surname O. Su Qianxi had not eaten at night, and her stomach was growling. Suddenly craving seafood porridge, Li Xiqing drove around for a long time before he found a chain kanji restaurant. It was supper time, so she ordered a lot of barbecue, porridge, and various cold dishes. Sitting there, Li Xiqing secretly curled his lips and scrolled through his contacts. He had already called all the people he could think of. As long as they had a good relationship with each other, they would brag about it. Especially when he called the old house, Li Xiqing was smiling like a fool. Su Qianxi looked at him and smiled. Qin Shuhua was overjoyed. She asked Su Qianxi to answer the phone and gave her a lot of instructions. Grandpa warned Li Xiqing, "Young man, there is a knife in your head." Su Qianxi blushed when she heard it in the car with the speaker on. Li Xiqing scrolled through the contacts, looked at the time, and said, "Luo Zhan lives nearby. Ask him to come down." Then he called Luo Zhan. Su Qianxi seemed to remember that Luihan's house was not far from here. As a nerd, Luo Zhan was certainly doing what a nerd should do at this time. Hearing the phone ring, his hands suddenly trembled. Oh no, dash. Chapter 412. Seeing another pentakill, Luo Zhan was so heartbroken that he almost smashed his phone. Damn, it's winter vacation. What a bunch of elementary school students. What a scam. Ah, my rank. Luo Zhan threw away the large-screen phone, picked up the phone that was ringing non-stop in front of him, and shouted angrily, "Hello." Li Xiqing narrowed his eyes and asked dangerously, "Where are you?" Luo Zhan immediately calmed down and replied, "At home. I am at the porridge shop near your house. Come down." Not allowing any more questions. Okay, this was Li Xiqing. Supper? Yes. Okay, I'll be right there. Luo Zhan threw the phone away, quickly picked up a coat, and went out. Li Xiqing hung up and found that Su Qianxi was also on the phone. The call seemed to have been connected. "Hello, Ihan? Luihan?" Li Xiqing was a little unhappy, pursing his red lips and looking at her with a pair of deep eyes. Su Qianxi blinked and continued, "Where are you?" Luihan was running at night, answering the phone while running slowly, slightly panting. "I am running outside." "What's wrong?" "I am at the XX park near your house. Come over if you have time. I have something to tell you." "Okay." Luihan looked around. "Give me 10 minutes. "Okay, I am in room 88. "Okay, see you later." Luihan hung up the phone and started running again, but this time, he was much faster than before. At the door of the porridge shop that Su Qianxi mentioned, Luihan stopped, calmed his breath, and walked in. However, when he entered, a huge force hit him from behind. Luihan was caught off guard and almost fell. Turning his head, he saw a man in a gray coat with a hood over his head. His hair was a bit messy under the hood. He apologized to Luihan, I'm sorry. Luihan looked over and found that this person was a bit familiar. His expression became strange. "It's you?" Luo Zhan took a closer look and recognized Luihan. Today, Luihan was wearing a set of dark blue sports clothes and the latest dark blue Jordan shoes. He looked quite sunny. I didn't mean to. Luo Zhan quickly waved his hand. It's so late. Why are you here? Not on purpose. If someone else had said this, he might have believed it. But this guy. From the first time Louis Han saw him, he felt very uncomfortable. She turned around and decided to ignore him. She asked the attendant, "Where's room 88? This way, please." The waiter led Louis Han to the end of the corridor. However, Luo Zhan also immediately followed, curling up into a ball. Louis Han felt a little disgusted. He stopped and said impatiently, "Why are you following me?" "What do you mean I'm following you? I'm also going to room 88. Why don't you say you're following me? This is ridiculous." Luo Zhan sneered and squeezed past him. He pushed the door open and shouted, "Brother, why are you looking for me so late at night?" Li Xiqing was peeling the shrimp shell for Su Qianxi. His movements were slow and elegant. Seeing Luo Zhan coming in, followed by Louis Han, Li Xiqing chuckled. "When did you two start dating?" Chapter 413. No way. Luo Zhan was very likely to be gay. Was Louis Han turned gay? Slow down. Li Xiqing poured her a cup of tea. Hearing that, Louis Han walked in with a gloomy face. "Why didn't you wear your glasses today?" Su Qianxi moved the stool next to her and motioned for him to sit down. Louis Han's eyes softened. Sitting down next to her, he said, "I used sun toss. That's what you'll do in the future. You look pretty good without your glasses." Louis Han's smile widened as he said, "Okay." He had not seen her for a long time, and she did not look so good. Louis Han moved his lips and said in a low voice, "You've lost weight." Hearing Louis Han's cryptic tone, Li Xiqing felt it was harsh. He quickly peeled the shrimp, dipped it in the sauce, and fed it to Su Qianxi. "Honey, ah." Su Qianxi did not hesitate to take a bite of the shrimp. After eating half of it, Li Xiqing put the other half in his mouth. After eating, she glanced at Louis Han casually. Louis Han's expression at the moment was indescribable. "Ouch, it hurts my eyes." Luo Zhan covered his eyes. "It's not good for you two to show up late at night, right?" The waiter snickered and served them tea. Luo Zhan gulped it down unceremoniously and asked, "Go ahead. You usually don't come to me for no reason. Now that you've invited me for supper, there must be something you want me to do." Humph, look how well he knew him. Maybe he could blackmail him even more. Li Xiqing took a sip of tea and said slowly, "Nothing. I just wanted to tell you that Mrs. Li is pregnant, and I'm going to be a father." Luo Zhan stared at him with his eyes wide open. Louis Han's hand holding the cup slightly tightened. Looking at Su Qianxi, his eyes narrowed. Su Qianxi met his eyes and nodded happily. "Han, I'm pregnant." Louis Han's heart suddenly felt like it had been bounced by a spring. With a smile on his face, he pretended to be relaxed and said, "That's great. Can I be a godfather?" "Yes." Su Qianxi put her hand on her belly, and her pale face was shrouded in the glow of happiness. "Definitely." Louis Han's eyes darkened. He picked up the teacup and took a sip. Li Xiqing clearly noticed that the smile on his lips was a bit stiff. "Come, let me introduce you." She looked at Luo Zhan. "Luo Zhan, this is my good friend, Louis Han." "Yes." Luo Zhan pouted. He also knows O Ming's woman. "Of course, Lily and I are classmates, and Han is in the same class as us. We often play together." Su Qianxi looked at Louis Han. "Isn't that right, Han?" "Yes, we are very close." When Louis Han said this, he glanced at Li Xiqing and chuckled. Li Xiqing clearly noticed his provocation and raised an eyebrow. Luo Zhan clearly felt that the atmosphere was not quite right, so he quickly tried to smooth things over. "How can we not drink on such a happy day? How about some?" Then, before anyone could answer, he shouted, "Waiter, 2 dozen beers." 2 dozen. Su Qianxi was shocked. Mr. Li has a weak stomach and cannot drink beer. It's too cold. That's because I don't want to develop in that direction. Otherwise, do you think you're famous in the industry? Naive. Oh my, Luo Zhan slammed the bottle on the table and roared, it seems that you're deliberately going against me today? Bullshit, I can also. Lui Han said contemptuously. What's there to fight about? Li Xiqing said casually as he poured water for Su Qianxi. Just go and compete. Luo Zhan has several computers at home. Yes, go to my house, compete. Luo Zhan got off the table and reached out to Lui Han. Let's go. You'll know after the competition. Do you dare? Chapter 4:15. Luo Zhan stumbled to Lui Han's side and put his arm around his back. Lui Han mocked mercilessly, you can't even stand properly. What's the point of competing? You can't stand properly. Obviously. You are swaying. Come on, let's go home and sleep after the competition. I'll beat you in a second, I'm telling you. I'll say it back to you. The two of them walked out with their arms around each other's shoulders, stumbling and smelling of alcohol. Su Qianxi looked at them worriedly and pushed Li Xiqing. You must be doing this on purpose. They are already drunk. Go check it out. There's nothing to see. It's just a competition. Li Xiqing did not care. Are you full? Go home. Su Qianxi stared at him and stood up to catch up with Luo Zhan and Lui Han. The two guys supported each other and had already walked out of the door. It was a bit cold outside, and Su Qianxi's coat was still left in the room. Su Qianxi shivered and looked out, finding that the two men had disappeared. Walking around, she found that the two of them had fallen in the grass, Lui Han on the bottom, and Luo Zhan on top. Han! Su Qianxi exclaimed and went to pull him up. Although Lui Han was drunk, he also recognized the voice. His eyes opened, he got up, shook his head, looked at Su Qianxi, and said with a smile, Qianqian, you are drunk. I'll take you home. No. Luo Zhan shouted and kicked Lui Han. We haven't even started yet, and you want to run away at the last minute? Coward. Lui Han was furious and kicked him back. Get up. Let's compete. I'm not afraid of you. Let's go. Su Qianxi grabbed Lui Han's hand and shouted, Han, stop it. Let's go home. No, Qianqian, you don't understand. This is a fight between men. Lui Han waved his hand. Yes, this is a fight between men. Luo Zhan got up and grabbed Lui Han. Don't run away. Let's go. Who the F***ck escaped? Let's go. Lui Han was dragged by him, and the two staggered toward the neighborhood where Luo Zhan was. Seeing that they were about to leave, she yelled, Li Xiqing. She did not respond and ran to the door of the porridge shop. Then she saw him slowly walking out and giving her a massage. Su Qianxi grabbed him and shouted anxiously, hurry up, they are all gone. Li Xiqing glanced at the direction they were going and said nonchalantly, the direction is not wrong. We can go back. Su Qianxi was exasperated. If they are together, something bad will happen. What can happen to two men? Li Xiqing pinched her cheek. Don't worry. They are both straight men. Su Qianxi nodded. Lui Han also liked Su Qianxi, and there was no doubt that he was straight. But Luo Zhan should also be straight, right? Su Qianxi heard that, glanced at him and said, I'm not worried about that. I'm just afraid that they are too drunk and will freeze on the street. Then we will know if we follow them. Li Xiqing pinched her nose. I'll go get the car. Okay. Li Xiqing quickly drove over and followed them. Su Qianxi saw them enter the neighborhood with her own eyes and calmed down. Mrs. Li, let's go home. Chapter 4:16. The two walked up with their arms around each other's shoulders, and Luo Zhan began to dig into his pockets. Louis Han waited for him to open the door, leaning against the cold wall with a splitting headache. After waiting for a long time, Luo Zhan still did not find the key. He stood there, stunned. Louis Han was impatient and waved his hand. "Can you do it or not? Take it out." Luo Zhan snorted and searched all the pockets. "Strange, where is my key?" Louis Han was annoyed. He pulled him and reached into his pockets. Ding! The elevator arrived. A girl came over with a bag, took out the key, and opened the door. Louis Han and Luo Zhan did not care. Louis Han started to search under Luo Zhan's shirt. He felt something hard, but Luo Zhan's trouser pocket was too tight for Louis Han to take it out. "Hey, relax. I can't get out." The girl heard this and looked over. From her angle, she could clearly see the two of them overlapping. Luo Zhan shouted, "Come out. I'm already very relaxed." "Oh, it's going to break. Put your foot down." The girl's eyes lit up, but she quickly opened the door, walked in, and quietly hid at the door to watch. Finally, Louis Han took it out, and then there was the sound of a key. The girl blushed. "Oh no, you are taking out the key. I thought you were taking out the bird." Then, Louis Han inserted the key, and the door opened. As soon as he opened the door, he smelled the traditional smell of an otaku. Clothes, socks, and scarves were all piled together on the sofa. Inside, there was a long row of desks with 3 computers in a row. There were takeout boxes in the trash can at the bottom. Looking up, there was a stack of instant noodles, including Master Kong, Uni President, and a few that Louis Han had never seen before, as well as all kinds of ham sausage instant noodle partners, and kimchi. This, Louis Han looked disgusted. Why does this look like a dog kennel? No, a dog kennel is much cleaner than this. Luo Zhan snorted, closed the door, and went into the bathroom. Louis Han took off his coat and sat on the sofa. Casually grabbing it, it was a used sock. This is... Louis Han's obsessive-compulsive disorder was acting up. His head was already hurting, and seeing this scene, he had a headache. He just sorted the pile of dirty clothes and socks, and then he heard Luo Zhan's voice. He shouted, "Come on, come on, come on. Come on." Louis Han looked disdainful. Dog kennel. Luo Zhan also felt that his nest was like a dog's nest, but he didn't care at all. He turned on a computer, and all 3 screens were lit up. Then, Luo Zhan rummaged below, found a laptop, and threw it to him. Louis Han opened it and started typing. He was getting more and more dizzy and had a terrible headache. After turning it on, Luo Zhan couldn't stand it. "It's so dirty." Louis Han complained, but when he smelled the vomit, he couldn't help but throw up. The two of them vomited together. Louis Han accidentally vomited on himself and took off his clothes in disgust. Luo Zhan was also disgusted. He stumbled to his feet and wiped his mouth with his sleeve. "Let's go. I'll take you to a clean place." As she spoke, she took off her shirt, pulled Louis Han back to the room, and fell into her own bed. The room was much cleaner. Louis Han didn't mind and fell into his bed. The two of them, one horizontally and the other vertically, were sleeping soundly, completely unaware of what was happening. In the middle of the night, Louis Han was shivering from the cold. He hugged a stove and slept soundly. Chapter 4:17. Seeing this, Luo Zhan snorted. "There are clothes in the closet. Put one on and get out." Louis Han walked to his closet and opened it. There was a strong smell of rancidity. Louis Han was about to throw up. His first reaction was to close the closet door. Resisting the urge to beat him up, he gritted his teeth. "Can't you live like a human being?" Luo Zhan rolled his eyes at him. "Wear it or not. I don't even want to wear my new clothes." There was no heating in the south, and it was raining outside. The temperature was only a few degrees. Louis Han shivered in the cold, jumped onto the bed, and pulled the quilt over him. Hey, 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 what are you doing? Are you gay? Luo Zhan yelled. Louis Han was much stronger than him. Pulling the quilt over to him, he felt much more comfortable. Luo Zhan did not have anything on him. Leaning against Li Siqing's cold body, he did not fight him, in case he froze to death and had to take legal responsibility. Pursing his lips, Luo Zhan reached out to open the cabinet on the bed and pulled out another quilt. Rolling the quilt, he walked down, opened the closet, and threw a few clothes at Louis Han. After Louis Han was comfortable, he picked up the clothes and saw the brand new tags on them. He couldn't help but laugh and said, "My goodness, such nice clothes, but you made them look like they were worn by a tramp. You don't want them? Give them back." Then he reached out to take them back. How could Louis Han give them back? He put the clothes on. However, they were a bit short. His pants were also a bit short. Louis Han stood up and purposely compared their heights. Louis Han was 185 centimeters tall, a little shorter than Li Siqing, but he was definitely tall. However, Luo Zhan, Louis Han looked at him with disdain. Are you 1.7 meters tall? F***ck off. I'm 178 centimeters tall. Luo Zhan threw a punch at him. Louis Han dodged and said, "Jacket, it's freezing. I don't have a new jacket. An old one will do." Luo Zhan lay back down, waved his hand, and said impatiently, "Outside. Take one and get out." Louis Han picked up the clothes and went out of the room. However, as soon as he stepped out of the door, he smelled an extremely unpleasant odor. Frowning deeply, Louis Han couldn't understand how such a person became a hacker. He couldn't even take care of himself. After walking around outside, Louis Han concluded a few points. 3 meals were taken out, clothes were washed at least once a week, toiletries were produced at the beginning of the year, and most of the bottles were still dusty. He could not look straight at her. Louis Han's headache worsened. Glancing at his clothes, he accepted his fate and started to pack up. After throwing the clothes into the washing machine, Louis Han began to clean up the living room. After working back and forth for more than 2 hours, the clothes had been washed 3 times, and the living room had been completely changed. Louis Han was very satisfied with his masterpiece. He opened the door and went in. Luo Zhan was sound asleep. She searched through his wardrobe, new, old, expensive, cheap. She didn't care if they were ruined or shrunk. She removed all the tags and threw them into the washing machine. After drying all the clothes, Louis Han left a note, "I will not return the clothes for the debt. You don't have to thank me too much." Luo Zhan slept until the afternoon. When he woke up, it was already past 3 o'clock. Seeing the note on the bedside table, Luo Zhan didn't care. He threw the note away and got up to go to the living room to find clothes to wear. He was surprised to find that the room was very clean, very clean. Luo Zhan couldn't imagine that his doghouse could be so clean. The pile of dirty clothes and socks were all gone, as well as the table, sofa, and floor. God, is this man really a man? What a good wife and mother. Luo Zhan sighed. A cold wind blew, making him shiver. Unable to find clothes in the living room, Luo Zhan turned back to the room and found that the wardrobe was also empty. Luo Zhan found that except for the big underpants on his body, he had nothing to wear. Chapter 4:18. It was colder this year than usual. Su Qianxi was learning how to make cakes from Lu Sa in the kitchen. Tomorrow was New Year's Eve, so she could keep the cakes for the ancestors. Qin Shuhua also came in to help. While teaching Su Qianxi, she also told her what to pay attention to during the new year. Su Qianxi listened and felt the atmosphere was harmonious. Song Yifan had just returned from London and immediately came to visit the old house. Hearing that Song Yifan was back, Su Qianxi happily told Qin Shuhua and ran to the living room. Seeing Song Yifan and Li Xiqing sitting face to face, she called, "Dad." Song Yifan's heart melted when he heard that. He waved at her and said, "Su Qianxi, I brought you a gift." Su Qianxi was even more surprised. She quickly walked up and sat next to him, looking forward to seeing him take out a gift bag. "Thank you, Dad." It was the first time Su Qianxi had received a gift from her father. She held it with joy and couldn't hide her smile. Li Xiqing was a bit jealous, but seeing her so happy, he did not say anything. He said slowly, "What did father-in-law Song bring for you? Don't you want to open it?" Su Qianxi did not let go of the gift and said, "I'll open it tonight." Song Yifan chuckled and rubbed her hair. "In a few days, do you want to go back to your hometown with me?" "Your hometown?" "Yes. Grandma is there. I told her about you, and she wants to see you." "Where is it?" "Dan City." "Wow, that's far." Su Qianxi blinked, her big eyes sparkling. She was a bit excited. "Do you want to drive there?" "Yes, it's about 3 hours." "Great." Su Qianxi happily agreed and looked at Li Xiqing. "Mr. Li, do you want to go?" "Okay." It was rare for Su Qianxi to be so interested, so how could Li Xiqing say no? Su Qianxi got Li Xiqing's approval and smiled even more happily. She asked Song Yifan, "Then why don't you spend the New Year here? Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. Shall we go together after dinner?" "No, thanks. I have to go back to spend the New Year with my parents. I will come pick you up on the second day of the New Year." "What?" She was a bit disappointed. "You have to come all the way here?" "No, I'll let him drive there. We'll use the navigation." "Give me the address." "Well, it's more convenient this way." He waved at her. "Come here." "What?" Although Su Qianxi was asking, she had already walked over. He reached out and hugged her in his arms. "It's a bit cold. Hug my wife to warm your hands." She blushed and nudged him with her elbow. "Don't be serious. It's really cold. Feel my hand if you don't believe me." She touched it, and it was indeed a bit cold. She grabbed his hand and put it in her pocket. With a smile on his face, Li Xiqing held her tighter. Song Yifan did not know whether to laugh or cry. "In front of me, who has been single for 10,000 years, is it appropriate for you to act like this? You'll get used to it." Li Xiqing did not feel embarrassed at all. Su Qianxi blushed and felt a little embarrassed. Chapter 419. She blushed and stood up. "I'll walk you out." "It's fine. Keep warm. It's cold outside, and the baby is afraid of the cold." Song Yifan waved his hand and walked out with his bag. After Song Yifan walked away, Li Xiqing could not help but start to grope her. Su Qianxi slapped his hand away and warned in a low voice, "We're still in the living room. Then let's go back to the bedroom." Li Xiqing stood up with her in his arms and carried her back to the bedroom despite her protests. Su Qianxi blushed, reached out and patted his back, shouting, "Stomach, stomach." He paused and felt a bit resentful. He reached out and opened the door. Entering the room, he locked the door behind him, then put her on the bed and kissed her hard on the face. Gritting his teeth, he whispered, "I shouldn't have let you get pregnant so early." Su Qianxi chuckled, put her arms around his neck, and kissed him on the lips. "Just wait a few more months. 2 months. 9 months. The baby is less than a month old. 2 months. Didn't you say the first 3 months and the last 3 months wouldn't work?" He bit her. "Only 2 months left, Mrs. Li," Su Qianxi nodded. Su Qianxi blushed slightly and looked away. Li Xiqing put his arms around her and kissed her face, from her mouth to her neck. Although he was lying on top of her, he was very careful and did not push her belly. Su Qianxi pretended to be calm, but she could not keep it up after 2 minutes. She pushed him away and said, "No more kisses. No food, not even a kiss." He was very angry. "Mrs. Li, do you want me to starve to death?" Su Qianxi pushed his face away and said with contempt, "It's been so many years, and you still haven't starved to death. I used to be ignorant when I was young. Now that I've grown up, I know how to find food." Su Qianxi heard that and chuckled. She turned over and said, "I'm sleepy. You can go play by yourself." Li Xiqing was depressed. He had gotten himself into trouble, and the fire extinguisher had stopped working. What a tragedy. She took off her coat and found a place to lie down on the bed. Li Xiqing followed her and hugged her tightly under the blanket. In the beginning, he was still obedient. She was in a daze, and she felt his hands touching everywhere. Her breasts were pinched, and her body shivered. She slapped his hand back. "Behave yourself." He stopped moving, but not long after, Su Qianxi felt that there was something rubbing against her behind. It moved a little and seemed to be getting more and more intense. "Oh, you are so annoying." She was annoyed and turned around. "I am sleepy, really sleepy." Sensing that she was really unhappy, Li Xiqing said sullenly, "You sleep. I won't touch you." Su Qianxi was speechless. If he didn't touch her, it would be even worse than if he did. Li Xiqing hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. "I was wrong. Don't be angry. Close your eyes." Su Qianxi was not sleepy anymore. She reached down and gently pinched him. "Ouch." He gasped and looked at her. She was lying with her eyes closed, but her hands were moving, touching him softly. He pressed her hand down, and her face became redder and redder. Pretending to be fierce, she said, "Just this once." Chapter 420. Su Qianxi blushed even more. Unbuttoning his shirt, she reached inside. Li Xiqing put her hand in and guided her. Su Qianxi closed her eyes and blushed the whole time. At the last moment, someone knocked on the door. Su Qianxi wanted to take her hand back but was stopped by Li Xiqing. "Just a little bit more." Li Xiqing felt a bit uncomfortable, holding her hand. With a low growl, Li Xiqing wiped himself with a tissue and went to open the door. However, it was someone he had expected. Su Qianxi also got up and looked out. Standing in front of their door was a young man who looked about 24 or 25 years old. He had long hair, red lips, white teeth, and bronzed skin, looking healthy and strong. Looking at his facial features, he was somewhat similar to Li Xiqing, but Li Xiqing looked more cold and reserved, while this man looked a bit dangerous and fierce, arrogant and domineering. He was very tall and looked a little taller than Li Xiqing, but his body looked much stronger than Li Xiqing. In such a cold winter, he was only wearing a tight black vest, which outlined his healthy and strong biceps, which made Li Xiqing's eyes twinkle. When the young man saw Li Xiqing, he whistled. "Long time no see, brother." Su Qianxi walked over and saw the man. Her eyes lit up and she said, "Brother-in-law. Sister-in-law is so beautiful." Li Jinnan curled his lips. It was not a big smile, but it was very eye-catching. It was the first time that Su Qianxi had been complimented by a man of his age. She blushed and said, "Thank you." Li Xiqing felt a sense of crisis. He pushed his brother away and slammed the door. Su Qianxi blinked and looked at him in confusion. He grabbed her arms and whispered, "Don't be seduced by my brother. Although he is handsome, he is very dangerous." Su Qianxi smiled and said helplessly, "He is your brother." However, Li Jinnan was indeed very dangerous. Captain Li's generation was a general, and Li Xiqing and Li Jinnan's generation was the third generation of the military. Except for Li Xiqing, the three brothers of the Li family had all joined the army. However, Li Beixing was a true lieutenant colonel. As for Li Jinnan, it wasn't easy for him to obtain a few military merits in Xinjiang and become a major, but he had to retire at the most critical moment. In her past life, Li Jinnan had probably informed his family about his retirement around the same time. There was no way of knowing what Li Jinnan did after that. He would only return home twice a year, but the things he did were definitely not good things that could be seen by others. Li Jinnan was given the cold shoulder and rubbed his nose. Qin Shuhua walked out. When she saw Li Jinnan, she was overjoyed. "Jinnan, when did you get back?" Li Jinnan smiled and called out, "Mom, did you miss me?" Qin Shuhua was overjoyed. She looked up and down and said, "Wow, you've lost weight, but you seem to have grown taller. Was it tiring in Xinjiang?" "I'm not tired." Li Jinnan put his hands in his trouser pockets and looked at the door of his second brother's room. It seems that second brother has a good relationship with second sister-in-law. Chapter 421. I'm not cold. Li Jinnan hugged Qin Shuhua. "Where is Grandpa?" "He's in the room. Let's go see your father." Qin Shuhua took Li Jinnan's hand and was about to leave when Li Xiqing's door was opened again. Seeing him come out, Li Jinnan was not in a hurry to see Grandpa. He stopped and said, "Brother, the same place." Li Xiqing squinted, walked in front of him, and said, "Let's go." Su Qianxi walked out and saw the brothers leaving one after the other. Looking at Qin Shuhua, she asked, "Mom, where are they going?" "Who knows? These two always have secrets." "Ah, they've grown up." Qin Shuhua sighed and then seemed to think of something. Waving at Su Qianxi, she said, "Look at the children's clothes your aunt sent from abroad. I'll give them to you." "Ah. That's too soon." "Not soon. We have to ask your grandpa to give the child a name." Su Qianxi was a bit embarrassed. "How old is he?" "It's not even a month, it's better to be prepared." "Come on." Li Jinnan threw a cigarette to Li Xiqing, lit it, and took a drag. Li Xiqing looked at him with a complicated look. "Have you decided?" "Yes. It's not easy to be where you are now." "Have you thought about it?" "I have submitted the application." Li Jinnan let out a long puff of smoke. "There is no turning back." Li Xiqing sneered and hit him on the shoulder. "Dad will break your legs." "Fine, I'll just give up my legs." Li Jinnan grinned, bright but playful. "I still have you. At most, I'll be punished and stay in the hospital for a few days, and everything will be fine. The punishment will hurt a lot." Li Xiqing let out a breath. "Think about it yourself, but it's really a pity. You've already made it this far. How many people can't reach this level in their lifetime?" When Li Jinnan heard that, he knew that Li Xiqing approved of his way of doing things. He took his hand away with a smile and flicked the ash off his cigarette. "This kind of life is boring. It's not what I want." "You want to explore the world?" "Do you want to explore the world?" "I haven't decided yet. I'll see when the time comes. Anyway, I'm not going back to the army. It's boring." Li Xiqing patted him on the shoulder with sympathy and admiration. "Then think about how to tell Grandpa and Dad. We'll talk about it after the new year. Let's enjoy the next few days first." Li Jinnan's lips curled up. He was as ruffian as ever. He reached out and hammered him. "I'll take you to a party tomorrow night. I guarantee it'll be fresh and exciting. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. Stay at home and accompany Grandpa. You won't be home for many days." "No, I have to go tomorrow." "You go too. I want to accompany your sister-in-law." "Bring sister-in-law along." Li Xiqing glanced at him and asked, "What game?" "A bet?" Li Jinnan's voice lowered. "I don't have any money." Li Xiqing was speechless. That was what she was planning. Turning around, Li Xiqing decided to ignore him. Back inside, Lu Sa was already preparing dinner. Qin Shuhua and Su Qianxi were sitting on the sofa, playing with a lot of things. There were children's clothes and toys. Li Jinnan smiled wickedly. "Mom, didn't sister-in-law just get pregnant? You are too impatient." Chapter 422. Li Jinnan was despised and immediately shut up. Li Beixing soon arrived home. The three brothers chatted and soon sat at the table together. Captain Li was very happy and sighed, "It's been a long time since we got together. It's so comfortable. The three of you, when you were little, I had hoped that you would be successful. Now, all of you are successful, and the most successful is Xicheng. You even have a baby. Ha ha ha, Qianqian, did the doctor say when you are due?" Su Qianxi was embarrassed. "Ahem, Grandpa, not so soon." The old man laughed heartily, and the others also laughed happily. After dinner, Su Qianxi took a shower and went to bed. Pregnant women were sleepy, and she did not take a nap today, so she quickly fell asleep. Early the next morning, the sound of firecrackers could be heard everywhere. People were worshipping their ancestors everywhere. Su Qianxi was taken by Qin Shuhua to worship the ancestors and see all kinds of ants. After the whole day, her face was stiff from smiling. After returning home in the afternoon, Su Qianxi took off her shoes and fell asleep on the bed. Lu Sa had gone home for the new year, so they had to do everything themselves. Su Qianxi originally wanted to sleep for a while and then get up to help, but she accidentally overslept. When she woke up, Qin Shuhua had already finished and prepared the dinner. Su Qianxi blushed and explained a lot to Qin Shuhua. Originally, she thought that Qin Shuhua would dislike her for being lazy, but unexpectedly, Qin Shuhua smiled and said, "It's okay. Pregnant women are sleepy. You are also tired today." Qin Shuhua's change was so big that Su Qianxi was a bit unprepared. She quickly helped set the table. When the family was eating happily, the elders gave everyone red envelopes, and everyone gave red envelopes to the elders. One after another, Grandpa was very happy. After dinner, Li Jinnan was a bit excited. He caught Su Qianxi and said, "Sister-in-law, do you want to go play with me?" Su Qianxi was surprised. Su Qianxi was a bit surprised. In her previous lifetime, Li Jinnan had never said a word to her, let alone asked her out. Subconsciously, Su Qianxi looked at Li Xicheng. Li Xicheng looked at Li Jinnan with some displeasure and said, "Go away. Second brother, second sister-in-law hasn't been there either, right? I'll take her out to play and see the world. What are you going to do?" Su Qianxi was bored at home, eating, sleeping, and visiting relatives all day. Li Jinnan was a very playful person. If he said it was fun, it must be very fun. To the casino. Hearing that, Su Qianxi's eyes lit up. Li Xicheng cursed inwardly and said in a low voice, "The casino is full of good and bad people. There's nothing fun here." "Second brother, that's not right. Didn't you often go to the casino to play? Don't tell me you have an old lover in the casino and don't want to bring sister-in-law there?" Li Xicheng said, "Your plan is too obvious." She smiled and took his hand. "I want to go. I haven't been to that kind of place yet." In other words, she had never been there in this lifetime. In her previous lifetime, she was lucky enough to be coaxed there twice by Tang Menjing. It was really fun inside. Hearing Li Jinnan's proposal, Su Qianxi also felt a bit itchy. Li Xicheng stared at Li Jinnan, but under Su Qianxi's eager and begging eyes, he had no choice. Okay. However, no one could have imagined that such an accident would happen. Chapter 423. Star City was the most mysterious large entertainment venue in Kingstown. It was a combination of casino, entertainment, leisure, fitness, trading, and catering. The consumption level was far beyond ordinary people's expectations. Every person who entered this place was either rich or powerful, and there were also many beautiful women who spared no expense to come up and catch up. A coquettish and high-profile Bugatti stopped at the entrance. Many people who were squatting at the entrance looked over, especially when they saw a tall and strong young man coming down from the driver's seat. He was dressed in black, and his tight vest showed off his healthy and taut lines. He was wearing a thin black leather jacket, and he looked very handsome and ruffian. Those people's eyes lit up, and they were like wolves and tigers. The doorman came up, and the tall man threw the key in his hand and turned to look at the door of the back seat. The man who walked out from behind was wearing a long dark gray coat with a high collar and a light gray cashmere sweater. He was tall and straight, and his eyes were cold and distant. His facial lines were tough, and he was reserved and steady. He looked more mature than the others. He stepped out, causing many people to exclaim, "Li Xicheng." Li Xicheng glanced at the magnificent gate, ignoring the flirtatious eyes of the beautiful women, turned around, and reached out to the back. A slender and petite figure came down. Su Qianxi's eyes were shining, looking at the gate of Star City with excitement. The Bugatti was driven away by the doorman, and Li Jinnan stepped in first. It was not the first time that Su Qianxi came to Star City, but every time she came, she felt a little excited. She skipped in excitedly, but she was hugged by Li Xicheng after 2 steps. "You're a mother now. Be careful." Su Qianxi pouted slightly and gave him a stare. However, this did not affect her good mood. Looking left and right, especially when she saw those big breasts and white legs, she subconsciously compared them with herself and couldn't help but cover her chest with her hand. Li Xicheng couldn't help but laugh and did not say anything, looking forward. Seeing Li Jinnan walking further and further away, Li Xicheng also quickened his pace and called, "Jinnan, wait a minute." The casino was on the 6th floor. When they took the elevator up, they heard the noise as soon as the elevator door opened. One by one, the sexy bunny girls held the trays in their hands up to their ears, twisting their waists in an enchanting manner. Seeing such a tall and handsome man like Li Jinnan, she winked at him and handed him a glass of champagne. Li Jinnan took it, and the unseriousness on his face disappeared. He smiled slightly and acted like a proper gentleman. Su Qianxi also took a glass, but Li Xicheng took it away and replaced it with water. Fine, she wouldn't drink. She wasn't a big drinker anyway. After exchanging 10 million chips with Li Jinnan, Su Qianxi only got 100,000. Depressed, she took Li Xicheng to the side to bet big or small, but Li Xicheng was a little absent-minded. Su Qianxi bet big, and before the pot was opened, Li Xicheng said, "You play for a while. I'll go see Jinnan." "Okay, go ahead." Su Qianxi waved her hand and shouted with the people next to her, "Big, big, big." Chapter 424. Li Jinnan and the man's gambling game was set in a splendid room. As soon as he entered the room, he saw a few men smoking, drinking, and chatting. When they saw Li Jinnan come in, a few people turned around. One of them was the most arrogant. He wore a big gold chain around his neck and a cigar as thick as a finger in his mouth. He was wearing a thick raccoon fur coat. He sneered and said, "I say, boy, you really dare to come alone?" Li Jinnan did not say a word, poured all the chips on the table, and finally threw the box with the chips. He looked sullen and said, "Cut the crap. Where is it? TSK, what's the hurry? I've already said that the market price of that thing is 50 million, but I don't care about money. As long as you can beat me at the gambling table, that thing is yours. But why did you exchange so many chips?" As he spoke, he stuck his head out and looked. "Io, there are millions here. It's still far from 50 million, right?" Li Jinnan looked even more sullen and slammed the table. "The market price of that thing is at most 20 million. Are you king kidding me? If I say 50 million, then it is 50 million. The big man spat out a thick cloud of smoke and spread his hands. "Don't take it if you have the guts. Take your chips and get the hell out of here." "Ha!" Li Jinnan was disdainful. "What do you want to bet?" 5-card stud. "What if I win and you don't want to admit it?" Li Jinnan looked sullen. "I, old Jean, am also a reputable person. I won't go back on my word. Otherwise, who in the underworld would play with me? Don't you think so, boy?" That was true, but Li Jinnan had to be careful of Lao Jin because he was too insidious and cunning. Fortunately, he had a backup plan. I met old Madame Jean once some time ago. A cold and steady voice came from outside. Everyone looked towards the door. A steady and tall figure appeared in front of everyone. He walked in slowly and said in a calm voice, "The old lady is in good health. She has always praised her son for being sensible and considerate. Tell me, if I tell her what you said, will she believe me?" Li Xicheng. Lao Jin obviously recognized him. Although this guy was not in their circle, Li Xicheng had been so famous recently that all the people in the legal circles had to give him face. Old Jin's mother, Mrs. Jin, was one of the well-known old artists in the country. Unfortunately, her health was getting worse and worse, so she didn't meet people easily. Some time ago, she had painted a jade sculpture for Li Xicheng, which showed how influential Li Xicheng was. Even Lao Jin had a whole new level of respect for this kid. Seeing Li Xicheng here at this moment was far beyond his expectation. Li Xicheng nodded. "It's me. I don't know what Mr. Jin has against my brother. Why don't we solve it together?" "This is your brother?" Lao Jin sneered. "No wonder you are so bold and generous. It turns out that you are Li Xicheng's brother." Li Jinnan's expression changed slightly, and he warned, "Don't talk nonsense." "What? You dare to do it, but you don't dare to admit it? When you came with that girl to bully my little lover a few days ago, you were not so cowardly. You threw millions at me. You were so rich. What happened now? You don't even dare to say a word in front of your brother?" Chapter 425. I'll explain it to you later. Anyway, it's not my fault. This guy took the jade that Grandpa gave me and refused to give it back. Li Xicheng's face darkened. Grandma went away and looked away. If I knew he was so shameless, I wouldn't have worn it. Li Xicheng wanted to strangle him. He had been eyeing the blood jade for a long time. Grandpa was unwilling to give it to him, but it was given to Li Jinnan. This guy actually lost it. Seeing Li Xicheng's unkind face, Li Jinnan felt even more guilty. "I'll count to 3. If you don't want to play, then leave. I don't have time to watch you brothers fight." Lao Jin waved his hand. 3, 2, 1. "I'll bet with you." Li Xicheng sat down. "What do you want to play?" "Great." Lao Jin smiled and sat down across from him. 5-card stud. In the beginning, Su Qianxi bet 500 yuan at a time. However, every time she bet, she could win it back. Therefore, the bet became bigger and bigger. In the end, Su Qianxi had bet 100,000 yuan. Many people stared at the pile of chips in front of Su Qianxi, dazed. After playing for more than 2 hours, she had not lost even once. Feeling a bit bored, she sighed. "Can't you let me lose once?" Someone next to her glared at her and said unkindly, "Young man, you will be easily beaten like this. I'm telling you." Su Qianxi smiled and put away all the chips, turning around to play baccarat again. When she first came to baccarat, she took a small basket. However, after a dozen rounds, she changed the small basket to a big one, which was a bit too heavy to play. Many people stared at her. Feeling a bit creeped out, Su Qianxi took the big basket and went to play something else. A short man came up, stared at the chips in Su Qianxi's basket and said, "Little girl, you're lucky. What do you want to play next?" "I'm not playing anymore. I'm going to find my husband." Su Qianxi did not want to talk to him at all. She had a strong feeling that he was a liar. However, the short man did not give up and kept talking to her. "Do you want to try 5-card stud? It's fun. Come here." "I won't. Let me teach you." "Come here, don't be afraid." "But I don't know how." She stopped and was a bit impatient. "Go find someone else to play." "I don't like that." "How about playing Pai Gao?" "No." "Then you should know how to roll dice, right?" She gave him a strange look and called Li Xicheng. When that person saw this, his expression changed. "If you don't want to play, then don't play. Why did you call me pretentious? Su Qianxi was furious and said, damn idiot. That person was also angry. Why are you still scolding people? Where's your manners? The call was connected, and Su Qianxi was furious. You scolded me first. Where are your manners? Li Xiqing heard it clearly on the phone. He asked in a low voice, what's going on? Hubby, someone is pestering me and won't let me go. The man pursed his lips and left. Where are you? I'll have Jinan pick you up. Li Xiqing's voice was a bit deep. Chapter 426. Su Qianxi nodded. Her bad mood was immediately lifted. Yes, I haven't lost a single game tonight. Then don't you know how to exchange these small chips for large chips? It's easy to be targeted if you carry so many. As he spoke, he had already taken the basket and brought her into the private room. It had to be said that Lao Jin was indeed capable of making a fortune through gambling. In just 3 hours, Li Xiqing had lost more than 20 million. It was already 10 p.m., and he had to take Su Qianxi back to bed. Li Xiqing was a bit restless. He was at the table, but his heart had flown out. Seeing Su Qianxi come in, Li Xiqing finally calmed down a bit and waved at her. Come here. Su Qianxi came over, saw the chips on the table, and then looked at the chips in her basket, which probably added up to less than 5 million. She asked, what are you playing? It seems like it's a big game. 5-card stud. Do you know how to play? Li Xiqing took her hand and calmed down. Yes. Su Qianxi rubbed her hands, looking pleasantly surprised. You play for me. Li Xiqing stood up and pressed her down. Li Xiqing's luck was not good, really bad. Hey, Lao Jin was not happy. Is it appropriate for you to play with a woman? It's my money. Why do you care? Li Xiqing glanced at him coldly. Lao Jin arched an eyebrow and spread out his hands. No problem. Since a woman is playing, I have to be a gentleman. In the next game, no matter what the cards are, I will let you speak first. Oh, okay. Su Qianxi put her hand on the table and slapped her fingers excitedly. Let's play. Lao Jin looked at Su Qianxi and felt she was like a child. Li Xiqing was such a mature man, but why did his wife look so young? However, Lao Jin was not a gossipy person. He waved his hand, and the dealer next to him had opened a new deck and sent out the cards one by one. Su Qianxi had an 8 of hearts, and Lao Jin had a king of spades. Her cards were more than a little small. The woman looked at her hand and said, you said it. I spoke first, so I'll raise 500,000 first. The subordinates behind Lao Jin laughed. Lao Jin laughed the happiest and said, you may not know the rules. Every time you raise, you must raise at least 1 million. Oh, 5 million then. The smile on Lao Jin's face disappeared and he subconsciously looked at her expression. Su Qianxi still had a smile on her face, as if nothing had changed. Old Jin looked at his trump card. Follow. Then the dealer dealt the cards again. Su Qianxi added more and more chips each time. In the end, the chips on the table were piled high, and both sides had bet 30 million. Su Qianxi's cards were 8, 9, 10, and J, a flush. Lao Jin's cards were 3 kings and a queen of diamonds. With a smile, she looked up and asked, honey, how many chips do we have left? From the beginning to the end, Li Xiqing did not look at her hand. Hearing this, his eyes softened and he said, I still have more than 20 million. Oh, can I buy all of them? Of course. Li Jinan was overjoyed. Sister-in-law, is it a straight flush? That's awesome. Su Qianxi waved her hand. I was just lucky. Then I will buy all of them. What about you, Mr. Jin? Lao Jin's expression changed. Seeing the proud smile on Su Qianxi's face, he began to calculate. Chapter 427. However, the chance of a straight flush was too low. Was this woman really that lucky? Old Jean was a little bewildered, but he stared at the woman who was smiling brightly. After a while, he closed all the cards and said with certainty, "I'm not calling." Su Qianxi suddenly laughed and took Li Xiqing's hand. "Mr. Li, he's not calling." Then she revealed her card, which was an ace of spades. When such a card was thrown out, everyone's eyes widened in shock. Li Xiqing looked at the card for a while and chuckled. Lao Jin suddenly stood up from his chair and slammed the table. "Are you King kidding me?" Su Qianxi blinked and laughed. "That's so funny. It's just a game of cards. Why are you so angry? You know, this is a casino. You're stupid, and you're blaming me?" Li Jinan could not help laughing and gave her a thumbs up. "You're amazing, my sister-in-law. You won back all my brother's losses in one game." Su Qianxi heard that and looked up at Li Xiqing. "How much did you lose?" "More than 2,000. Li Xiqing rubbed her head. "Shall we continue?" "Of course." Su Qianxi did not dare to say anything else, but once she was in a casino, her luck was always very good. "Shall we continue, Mr. Jean?" Lao Jean snorted. "Continue." However, after a few rounds, old Jean lost miserably. What made him even angrier was that he had been tricked by Su Qianxi in the same way. After a while, Su Qianxi had won more than 50 million. Including what Li Xiqing had lost at the beginning, she had more than 20 million left. However, it was not enough. Li Jinan had just told her what had happened, which made her a bit angry. She puffed up her cheeks and continued. 36 million. "Mr. Jean, are you in or not?" Su Qianxi smiled and looked at him calmly, tapping on the table with her fingers. That look and that expression were exactly the same as Li Xiqing's. Li Jinan saw it, and so did Li Xiqing. Curling his lips in satisfaction, he looked at the hesitant Lao Jin. Old Jin's reputation was not small at all. There were 4 A's, but Su Qianxi was not scared at all. What made Lao Jin even more confused was that Su Qianxi's hand was a flush. K, Q, J, 9, all of them were spades. If the woman's trump card was the 10 of spades, she would win if she managed to put the deck into a straight flush. But as long as that card wasn't the 10 of spades, she would definitely lose. Seeing her proud expression, Lao Jin's forehead was covered with sweat. It had been a few times, and he had been deceived by her well-endowed appearance. He was able to beat Li Xiqing by so much just now because Li Xiqing was unlucky. Coupled with some psychological tactics, Li Xiqing lost badly. However, this woman was not only lucky, but her luck was also heaven-defying. She was even good at psychological warfare. What to do? "Boss, don't be fooled again. This woman is too despicable." Lao Jin thought so too. However, what if? Seeing his hesitation, Su Qianxi said impatiently, "I'm so sleepy. Are we playing or not? If not, I'm going home." Lao Jin was frustrated. It was the first time in his life that he had been despised by a little girl. If people knew about it, they would laugh their heads off. After hesitating for a long time, he finally pushed his chips forward. "I'm in. I don't believe you really have a straight flush." It was the last game, and the winner would be decided in one game. Su Qianxi glanced at him and said, "Are you sure? Don't regret it." Chapter 428. Su Qianxi looked at him sympathetically and revealed her card. Li Jinan almost jumped up. Even Li Xiqing couldn't help but grin, rub her hair, and whisper, "Well done." Lao Jin stood up and looked at her card. When he saw the 10 spades on it, he became short of breath and angry. F***CK. He sat back in his chair, his chest heaving up and down. He waved his hand in defiance. Again. "I'm done." Su Qianxi yawned and leaned back in the chair. "I'm so sleepy. Give it back to us, and we will go home to sleep. You want to leave after winning the money? Lao Jin's face darkened. Su Qianxi heard that and retorted, if you don't leave after winning the money, do you want to leave after losing the money? Look at the time now. If you don't sleep, others will have to. Besides, I am pregnant now. If the baby in my belly does not get enough sleep, can you be responsible? How can you be so shameless? You said you would return the money after winning. Are you trying to be shameless now? Seeing her like this, Li Xiqing seemed to see the unruly and capricious Su Qianxi when they were not married. However, she used to be like this to her own people. Now, it felt quite good. Lao Jin was speechless after hearing her words. Li Jinnan stared at him coldly. He put his hand into his leather coat and took out a cold black metal. He gently rubbed it and warned, I'm also doing a good deal with you. Don't force me. Lao Jin's men saw this and became worried. They whispered, what should we do? Do we really have to give the jade back to them? Seeing the gun, Lao Jin's face darkened. I said I won't give it back. What do you mean? Then give it back. Cut the crap. Li Jinnan reached out and looked unfriendly. Lao Jin took a deep breath, stretched out his hand, and took the blood jade from behind the fur coat, and threw it in Li Jinnan's direction. Shocked, Li Jinnan quickly caught it and checked it carefully. Seeing that it was intact, he let out a sigh of relief. Let's go, Li Xiqing whispered. Li Jinnan nodded. Walk in front with sister-in-law. Is he afraid of a surprise attack? Old Jin scoffed in disdain, I'm not that despicable. Li Jinnan chuckled and said, are you thinking too much? I just want to stay and take the rest of the money. Don't you want 50 million? Quickly count 50 million, and the rest is ours. Old Jin's expression became even more unsightly. He gave the order, and his subordinates stepped forward. She yawned and checked the time. It was almost 11 p.m. No wonder she was so sleepy. He took her downstairs and asked the doorman to fetch the car and park it at the door. However, the two of them waited in the car for 10 minutes, and there was no sign of him coming down. Su Qianxi was a little worried and said, go and have a look. Why hasn't uncle come down yet? Okay, wait for me in the car. He kissed her on the cheek, opened the door, and walked out. After a few minutes, Su Qianxi could not sit still anymore. She knew that Lao Jin was not a good guy. What if something happened to him? She picked up the phone and called Li Xiqing, only to find that his cell phone had been turned off. It was probably out of battery, and she did not save Li Jinnan's number. Chapter 429. As soon as she stepped on the steps, she heard a shout inside. A figure ran out like a fly, wearing a cap on his head and a big mask on his face, only revealing a pair of eyes. When the figure saw Su Qianxi, he paused for a moment, but then quickly ran forward. However, things did not go as he wished. Before he ran 2 steps, he saw people surrounding him. There were about 7 or 8 men in casual clothes, holding guns in their hands, shouting, "Don't move, police!" The man took a step back, but he was surrounded by plainclothes policemen all around him. The people at the door fled in all directions, for fear of being involved. Su Qianxi was no exception. However, among the people around him, he was the closest to him. Before he could run out, he heard the sound of wind behind him. His hand was grabbed, and he was pulled over. Su Qianxi screamed, her voice sharp and frightened. Don't touch me. Let go. A sharp fruit knife was in front of her. Su Qianxi was grabbed by the neck, and her first reaction was to struggle. Don't move. The voice was muffled because of the mask, and it sounded like he was panting after running. However, somehow, Su Qianxi felt that it was somewhat familiar. The knife has no eyes. Cooperate with me, and I will not hurt you. The voice was very low, and only the two of them could hear it. Su Qianxi behaved, but her heart still couldn't help racing. Biting her lower lip, Su Qianxi felt that her body was trembling with fear. Get out of here. If you don't come over, I will die with her. The man roared. Li Xicheng and Li Jinan came out from inside and heard the movement here. Li Xicheng suddenly had a bad feeling and strode forward. Seeing his wife being held, he was so scared that his heart almost stopped. His face slightly pale, he took a step forward, but his voice was unusually calm. Don't be impulsive. She is my wife. I am Li Xicheng. You should know me. The gangster glanced at Li Xicheng, and his eyes fell on Li Jinan behind him. Without saying anything, he tightened his grip on Su Qianxi, took a step back, and shouted, "Ask them to go away and let me go. Otherwise, I can't guarantee what I will do." Li Xicheng's face was a little pale, and even his breathing was a little disordered. However, his eyes were terrifyingly calm. He said, "Okay, listen. She is pregnant now and can't take any risks. If anything happens to her or the child, I, Li Xicheng, definitely have the ability to take your life." The gangster sneered. Of course I believe you. Who doesn't know Li Xicheng? But I'm not the one holding your wife hostage, it's the police. Get them out of the way. Did you hear that? Get out of the way. Li Xicheng growled. Let him go. Get out of the way, a leading officer shouted. We must ensure the safety of the hostages. Those policemen had already silently retreated. One of the policewomen somewhat unwillingly clenched her teeth. This guy has already gone to the SI to trade drugs more than once or twice. With great difficulty, we finally caught him with the goods. However, before she finished speaking, she saw Li Xicheng's sharp and dangerous look, and all her words were swallowed. Chapter 430. Don't come over. Or I will kill her. The voice was extremely dull, and she could hear that he was speaking in a low voice. However, when he spoke, Su Qianxi still felt very familiar. This voice, she must have heard it somewhere before. However, she did not speak again. The fear in her heart did not lessen because he was very likely to be someone she knew. Being held by the fruit knife, Su Qianxi walked out of the light of Star City. It was getting darker and darker, and there was a dark path behind her. A group of police officers, Li Xicheng, and the others followed at least 60 or 70 meters away. Suddenly, a car light was cast straight at them from behind. The beautiful sound of the sports car engine was very eye-catching, and everyone's eyes were attracted to the car. Su Qianxi clearly noticed that the body of the gangster was a little relaxed. Then, when the car reached them, Su Qianxi clearly heard the sound of the door opening and a deliberately suppressed female voice came, "Get in." Familiar. Before Su Qianxi could think of who it was, she was released by the gangster. Looking back, the gangster holding her had already gotten in the car. The beautiful sports car had very special graffiti and dye on the body, looking like a string of totems. Driving such a special car, was he deliberately trying to distract the police? Looking at the license plate of the car, she found that the license plate had long been covered, and nothing could be seen. The group of police ran as fast as they could, but how could they compete with the speed of the sports car? He escaped again. The policewoman unwillingly roared. Li Xicheng immediately came up to check on Su Qianxi. Holding her face in his hands, he whispered, "Are you okay?" Su Qianxi clearly felt that his hand was slightly trembling. She grabbed his hand and put her other hand around his neck, whispering, "I'm fine. Don't be afraid." Li Xicheng breathed a sigh of relief, but then he laughed out loud. Why did the roles suddenly change? Bending down, he picked her up and walked to the car. Li Jinan drove over, ready to chase after the gangster at any time. However, seeing the scene of Li Xicheng carrying her, he finally breathed a sigh of relief and unlocked the car. He gently put her in and asked in a low voice, "Do you feel uncomfortable?" "No, but..." Su Qianxi thought for a moment and said, "I feel that their voices are a bit familiar. The men and women are familiar, as if I have heard them somewhere before." Li Xicheng's eyes lit up. Very likely to be an acquaintance? Not necessarily, but I've definitely heard their voices before. So, when I heard the man say that he wouldn't touch me, I felt less afraid. You're so brave. He gave her a thumbs up. Can you confirm who they are? I don't know. Li Xiqing also got into the car, closed the door, and said, no matter who it is, don't get too close to this kind of person. It's a felony to sell drugs. Okay, got it. She leaned in his arms and closed her eyes, feeling sleepy. I'm so sleepy. I'm going to sleep. Li Xiqing straightened up so that she could lean on his knees. His hand stroked her hair, and his heart, which had been on tenterhooks for a long time, immediately calmed down. At the same time, he was also filled with lingering fear. Fortunately, she was fine. Chapter 431. At home, the TV was playing the Spring Festival Gala. Qin Shuhua, Li Xiao, Li Beixing, and Captain Li were sitting at the mahjong table. Seeing Li Xiqing carrying Su Qianxi in, they all looked over. Shoo. Li Xiqing glanced at them and took Su Qianxi back to the room. Captain Li looked at the time. It was already past 11 p.m. He snorted unhappily and glared at Li Jinnan. Where did you go? I went to play. Sa took me there. Li Jinnan spread out his hands. You know, I always listened to him. No, it was Uncle who took us there, a voice came. Su Qianxi had come out again, yawning. Brother-in-law, you are too cunning. Su Qianxi said. Being exposed so rudely, Li Jinnan felt his forehead. Seeing Captain Li's eyes, he immediately bowed his head and said, Grandpa, I was wrong. The old man groaned and reached out to touch the tiles. He pushed the tiles away happily and shouted, touch yourself, ha ha ha, oh, Grandpa is so lucky. Although Li Beixing said so, he had already taken out the money and handed it over. Grandpa took the money one by one, smiling proudly. Coincidentally, the Spring Festival Gala was counting down on the TV. Grandpa pushed the tile forward and shouted, come on, where is Xiqing? Jinnan, Beixing, go and set off the firecrackers. It's 12 p.m. Li Beixing was speechless. Grandpa, firecrackers have long been banned in Kingstown. Have you forgotten? Captain Li was dazed for a moment, and then looked unhappy. What kind of stupid rule is this? No firecrackers on New Year's Day? What kind of atmosphere is that? Watch TV and go to sleep if you are sleepy, Grandpa. Li Xiqing walked out and stood next to Su Qianxi, looking at his watch. It's 0:02. Grandpa, aren't you sleepy? Don't you usually go to bed after 9 p.m.? I'm waiting for you. Old Master Shen glared at them. Wouldn't it be great for the whole family to stay together for New Year's Eve? It's fine if you two like to play around, but you even brought my little great-grandson along. How can I sleep in peace if I don't see you two coming back? Su Qianxi was a bit embarrassed and reminded him, not yet, Grandpa. Soon. Isn't it only 8 more months? No, I have to think of a good name for my little great-grandson. While speaking, Grandpa had already slowly returned to the room with the help of his walking stick. Good night, Grandpa, Li Xiqing said. The only response he got was the sound of his grandfather closing the door. The next day was New Year's Day. According to the customs, they were not allowed to wash things, call people's names from afar, or wake them up. As a result, Su Qianxi did not wake up until 10 p.m. He was long gone. She rubbed her eyes and washed up. When she went out, he just came back. Seeing her coming out of the bathroom, his first reaction was to look at her feet. Fortunately, he was wearing shoes. Why don't you sleep a little longer? Walking in, he opened the closet, found a winter dress, and handed it to her. Su Qianxi took it. Do you think I'm a pig? Can I sleep so much? Taking off the top of her coral velvet pajamas, she picked up her underwear and buttoned it up. Li Xiqing was dazzled by her white body. He tried to look away, but he still overestimated his willpower. Helplessly, Li Xiqing tilted his head and said, I find that you are becoming more and more open. Chapter 432. Li Xiqing picked up the winter dress and put it on her, whispering, You used to be shy when I looked at you, but now you can change in front of me. Raise your hand. Su Qianxi heard that and blushed, but she still raised her hand and said with a smile, We are an old couple now. No need to be shy. Li Xiqing fixed her clothes and reached behind her to pull the zipper. Hearing the words, old couple, he couldn't help smiling. Su Qianxi fixed the dress and put on a pair of tights. However, halfway through, she found that Li Xiqing was looking at her passionately. She couldn't help blushing again. Picking up the pajamas she had just taken off, she threw them at him and said angrily, Don't look. You just said we are an old couple, and now you are turning against me. Li Xiqing pinched her nose. You changed so fast. Su Qianxi looked away and ignored him. After putting on the pants and the jacket, Li Xiqing took her hand and said, Mom is waiting to take my new daughter-in-law to pay a New Year's visit. Let's go. Qin Shuhua was sitting in the living room, talking and laughing with Li Xiao and Li Beixing. Li Jinan had not gotten up yet. Seeing Su Qianxi coming out, he immediately stood up and said, Su Qianxi, come. Mom will take you to meet people. He said he was going to meet people, and he really meant it. After walking around the yard, they met all the aunts and got dozens of red envelopes. Later, Li Xiqing took them to some relatives' homes to visit. After a whole day, Su Qianxi was fed all kinds of snacks and tea. She did not have a meal all day, and when she got home, she was exhausted. After a good night's sleep, Su Qianxi was woken up by Li Xiqing the next day. On the second day of the new year, Su Qianxi was supposed to go back to her parents' home. Of course, it was the Su family. They had not even called each other for the whole year, and now she was going to their home to chat on New Year's Eve. Su Qianxi felt bored. She told Li Xiqing about it, and he glanced at her and said, Then I won't go. I don't think that's a good idea, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Let them know. You have a second family anyway. He kissed her. Let's go to Dan City today. She felt so happy. She nodded with a smile and put her arms around his neck. Okay. Seeing her so happy, Li Xiqing whispered, Kiss me. No. Then I'll kiss you. With that said, he sealed her lips and penetrated her from shallow to deep. She subconsciously closed her eyes and let him kiss her. She just tightened her arms around his neck. He called the Su family to tell them that he would not be going and drove to Dan City with Su Qianxi. Originally, Su Qianxi did not have morning sickness, nor did she get carsick. However, in the car, she vomited 3 or 4 times in 3 hours. They finally arrived at the Dan City, but there were many streets and alleys there. The route was a little complicated. It took Li Xiqing a long time to find the place Song Yifan had given him. However, the road was too narrow, and the car could not get in. Li Xiqing had to find an underground parking lot and park the car before he went to his father-in-law's home with his wife. Chapter 433. When Rong Rui saw them, he was also slightly surprised and went up to say hello. What are you doing here? Su Qianxi glanced at the gift boxes and gifts that Rong Rui was carrying and joked, Looking for Chengyu? Chengyu was also from Dan City. Su Qianxi knew that, and so did Li Xiqing. Seeing the pile of things in his hands, he knew that even if Su Qianxi was not right, it would not be far from the truth. Li Xiqing raised an eyebrow, looked around, and asked, Does Chengyu live nearby? Rong Rui blushed and coughed. Who said I was looking for her? I just came to visit relatives. Bye. Rong Rui walked a little fast. Su Qianxi watched him leave and couldn't help but think of her previous lifetime. It seemed that when Rong Rui pursued Chengyu in her previous lifetime, he was very crazy. Mr. Cheng and Mrs. Cheng squatted in front of their daughter's door and knocked hard. Mrs. Cheng began to yell, "Hey, look at Xiao Yang's daughter next door. She found a boyfriend at the age of 22, and now she is married and has a child at the age of 24. Your daughter is already a 26-year-old virgin. Why are you not worried at all?" Qing Yu's father had always been disdainful of such senseless activities. However, when Qing Yu's mother threatened to deduct half a month's salary and give half a month's bonus, he shamelessly joined the marriage team. Hearing what his wife said, Mr. Cheng looked triumphant and said, "I can't help it. I'm just like me. I'm good-looking and willful." Mrs. Cheng glared at him and continued to yell, "You are so good-looking, but you don't find me a boyfriend. You have to make mom and dad worry about your marriage. You are so unfilial." When Mr. Cheng was thinking about how to respond, the doorbell suddenly rang. His eyes lit up and he immediately got up. "I'll go open the door." Of course, Mrs. Cheng could tell what he was thinking. She threw him a contemptuous look and continued to yell. When Mr. Cheng opened the door, he saw a clean and handsome young man. He felt refreshed, but when he saw all kinds of expensive gifts in his hands, he instantly felt bored and asked, "Is this a promotion?" Rong Rui smiled, looking kind and gentle. He said, "No, uncle. I'm here for you." When Mr. Cheng heard that word, he felt like he had gone deaf. He asked, "What did you say? Who are you looking for?" "Qing Yu." Qing Yu's father looked like he had seen a ghost and shouted, "Mom, someone is looking for Qing Yu. He's a handsome young man." As soon as Mrs. Cheng heard the words, "handsome boy," she immediately jumped up from the ground and looked at Rong Rui. Overjoyed, she said, "Really? Are you really here for our daughter? Come in and have a seat." Mrs. Cheng ran to Qing Yu's room and knocked on the door, shouting, "Yu, someone is looking for you. Get up, get up." After being busy for a whole year, Qing Yu was finally able to take a break and have a good sleep, but she was woken up by her mother and father. With her messy hair and wrinkled pajamas, she opened the door and yelled, "So noisy, ah! Can't you let me have a good sleep?" Rong Rui was holding the gifts in both hands. Seeing Qing Yu like this, his calm face cracked. Seeing him, Qing Yu was stunned. Rong Rui raised his eyebrows at her, and his voice was calm and gentle. He said, "I'm here to see my parents." Qing Yu's eyes widened, and then she looked down at her dress. She immediately shrank back and slammed the door. Chapter 434. She widened her eyes, then looked down at her outfit, and immediately shrank back, slamming the door. As soon as she closed the door, she immediately rushed into the bathroom. Seeing her own image, she wanted to hit the wall. Ah! What should she do if she was seen? This bird's nest hair, these dark circles, this pale face, this sob, so embarrassing. Why did this guy come at this time? Didn't he want to celebrate the new year? Wait. Meet parents? What? This guy said, "See. Father. Mother. What the hell?" Qing Yu's heart beat faster, and her face immediately became hot. She quickly began to freshen up, combed her short hair, and then picked out a nice dress from the wardrobe, put it on, and put on a pair of jeans. However, after putting it on, she thought that wearing jeans would make her look very unfeminine. She stared at the mirror for a few seconds before taking off her pants again. She put on the dress that Qing Yu's mother repeatedly praised as elegant and generous. Walking to the mirror, she saw the latest Chanel perfume that Qing Yu's mother bought for her. The more she prepared, the faster her heart beat. She put her hand on the doorknob, and when she was about to open the door, she felt strange. Strange, why did she care so much? She didn't care about this guy? Damn! Annoyed, she opened the door and walked out. Qing Yu's mother happened to be serving tea to Rong Rui. She didn't know what she was talking about, but she was smiling like a chrysanthemum. Seeing Qing Yu coming out, Qing Yu's mother's eyes lit up. Rong Rui looked over, and his calm eyes also had some fluctuations. However, Qingyu did not want them to appreciate her beauty. She directly went forward, pulled Rong-rui up, and said, "Let's go." Rong-rui stood up and was pushed out of the sofa area. She picked up the 7 or 8 high-end gift boxes and pushed him toward the door. Qingyu's mother was shocked and shouted, "Yu, what are you doing? Rong-rui is a guest. You are too rude." Qingyu's father echoed, "That's right." She didn't care, opened the door, and pushed him out. However, Rong-rui's eyes darkened, and his footsteps stopped. No matter how she pushed, he wouldn't move. Qingyu blushed and could not push him out. She said angrily, "Mr. Rong, I'm sorry, but you are not welcome here." Rong-rui looked at her in confusion. "Did I do something wrong?" "You're not wrong. It's just that you're ugly. I don't want you to stain the air in my house." "Io, how is it ugly?" Mama Qing immediately ran over. "What a handsome and sensible young man. Don't bother about her. Come and have a seat." Qingyu was furious. "Mom. You don't know his true colors. This person is very bad." "How did it go bad? Tell me." Mrs. Cheng was unconvinced. "Lil Roy is such a good child. Why do you have to defame him like this? He's a big bad wolf. He's pretending, and he's really good at pretending. Let me tell you, don't beat him up. One day, you'll be sold by him, and you'll still be counting the money for him. I think we need to talk." Rong-rui said lightly, "You must have some misunderstanding about me. Just like last time at the airport, you." Chapter 435. A smile flashed across Rong-rui's eyes. He held her hand, took down all the things she was carrying and put them on the ground. Then he turned around and pulled her out. Seeing this, Mrs. Cheng immediately turned to look at Mr. Cheng and whispered, "Do you think your daughter likes this guy?" Mr. Cheng had a look that said, "You're talking nonsense," and said, "Otherwise, have you ever seen our daughter treat anyone like this?" "Oh, there's hope." Qingyu's mother was overjoyed. "I'll go prepare some good dishes to entertain our future son-in-law." When Papa Qing saw this, he pursed his lips and muttered, "Things haven't even started yet." She was pulled out by him and quickly went downstairs. She wanted to pull her hand back, but he was so strong that she could not compete with him at all. He tugged hard, but found that he couldn't take it back at all. "Let go." She sounded a little annoyed. Rong-rui acted as if he didn't hear her. He stopped an empty taxi and dragged her into it. To Yijing Bay. Hearing the name of the place, she was dazed, then looked at him angrily, grabbed his hand hard, and roared, "Let go of me. Why are you taking me there? Aren't we going to talk? I only know that place. I don't know anything else." Rong-rui's voice was unusually calm. Seeing the strange look in the driver's eyes, Rong-rui continued, "Besides, it's not like you haven't been there before. Didn't you enjoy it last time?" The driver finally turned around and continued to drive. She became angry and struggled with her hands and feet, yelling, "Get out of here, don't touch me, beast." "Young man, the girl doesn't want to." "You're going too far," the driver said kindly. Rong-rui glanced at the driver and said, "I'm just going to have a meal and apologize. I don't want to do anything. She thinks too much." She finally calmed down. Looking at her hand that was in pain, she stopped. The driver pursed his lips, but he didn't say anything. They soon arrived. He paid the fare and took her away. Yijing Bay was the only 5-star hotel in Dan City. Last time, Rong-rui had rested here. At that time, when she picked him up and let him stay here, he asked, "Have you ever had a boyfriend?" She shook her head. "Then what do you think of me?" Qingyu retreated with a red face. She did not know why, but she was taken to the bed in a daze. That was her first time, and it hurt so much that tears came out of her eyes. Afterwards, he smoked a cigarette and said with a serious face, "Don't worry, I will take responsibility." In fact, Qingyu did not want him to be responsible for anything. Last time, when Tang Menjiang gave birth in the hospital, she simply wanted to ask him about the video. Who knew, he said that later, and Xingyu had been holding a grudge until now. He said, I will take responsibility, you don't have to worry. Until she entered the elevator, her mind was in a mess. Looking at the elevator going up, the bright 13th floor made her shocked. She immediately reached out and pressed a random button, shouting, Rong Rui. He glanced at her and pressed the number 8 until the light above disappeared. The elevator went directly to the 13th floor, and she was dragged to 1318. It was the same room as last time. She resisted, but he held her hand and quickly entered the room. Chapter 436. She only felt that his breath was hot on her face, and her heart was pounding involuntarily. Light makeup and perfume. He took a deep breath. And you said you don't like me? His voice was a little low, like a feather, tickling her heart. Her face was getting redder and redder, and she slowly squatted down and said, That is the perfume my mom bought for me. I used it for the first time. Oh, the first time was given to me. It's quite meaningful. He put his hands on her side and stopped her from squatting down. In the future, the second time, the third time, and many more times after that, it can only be mine. The first time, she reached out and pushed him away, but he was so still and could not move. Rong Rui, are you kidding me? You can't get Tang Menjiang, so now you are pestering me? Interesting. Or are you deliberately approaching me in order to use me to take revenge on boss one day? Rong Rui's calm eyes finally had some fluctuations. He suddenly smiled brightly, showing a row of white teeth, and said ambiguously, You can think so. Qingyu felt annoyed. It was one thing for her to guess, but it was another thing to hear him admit it. She was not so careless that she didn't care that she was obviously being used. Gritting her teeth, she hit his chin with her head and gritted her teeth. Go to hell. He was caught off guard, covering his chin and stepping back. She took the opportunity to push him away, and her first reaction was to open the door of the room. There was anger in his eyes. He pulled her back with his big hand and threw her inside. She fell hard on the carpet and screamed. He squatted down, took her hand, and said calmly, Qingyu, I am serious. Marry me. I will marry you at any time. She laughed, kicked him with her legs, and sneered. Unfortunately, I don't want to marry a pervert. Pervert? He chuckled, picked her up with his big hand, and threw her to the bed. He reached out and unbuttoned his coat. Miss Cheng, I can be more perverted. S&M? Have you heard of it? She was thrown onto the bed and rolled around. Hearing what he said, her heart was suddenly lifted, and she ran toward the door. She had witnessed with her own eyes how perverted Rong Rui was. When he was working for Tang Menjiang, he had done all kinds of bad things. She had thought that he was one of boss's people and would not go against them anymore. Haha. Qingyu was furious, but unconsciously, her eyes were red. The door was getting closer and closer, but how could Rong Rui let her go? He rushed up and pressed her to the ground. Her chin hit the ground and she screamed. She did not know if it was because of pain, grievance, or fear. She suddenly sobbed, put her hands on the carpet, and tears flowed down. No, I beg you, let me go, Rong Rui. Seeing her tears, Rong Rui's fierce expression disappeared. He was a little annoyed. He held her up and said sullenly, Didn't you say that I'm a pervert? I'll show you. After that, she cried even more fiercely, crying out loud. Rubbing his forehead helplessly, Rong Rui got up and stuffed a tissue into her face, growling, Shut up. Chapter 437. Let's go. Rong Rui waved his hand impatiently. She was a bit confused. What did this man mean? Seeing her confused face, Rong Rui growled, Get out of here. Only then did she react. She scrambled to her feet, opened the door, and ran out. However, when she got out of the door, she found that, it seemed that she did not bring any money when she went out. Did she have to walk back? Although it had only taken her 10 minutes to get here by taxi, it would definitely double the time if she walked back. She hesitated in the hallway, but did not go back to Rong Roy for money. She walked down the hallway. When she got home, it was already half an hour later. She looked in the mirror in the hallway and found that her chin was a bit pale, but as long as she did not look up, she should not be able to see it. Adjusting her posture, she rang the doorbell. However, when the door was opened, she saw the face that she just swore she would never see again. Seeing her, Rong Roy smiled and said, "Dad, Mom, Yu is back." Hearing what he called her, she was petrified. Su Qianxi and Li Xiqing still did not find where Song Yifan's home was. Helplessly, she picked up her phone and asked him to pick her up. When Song Yifan picked them up, it was already 10 minutes later. Song Yifan's home was not a big house, and the furnishings and decorations inside were a bit old-fashioned. Different from the old house, the Song house was relatively simple. As soon as they entered the door, they saw the living room, where the ancestors were enshrined, the god of fortune, and all kinds of pottery statues of the goddess of mercy. The smell of incense was a bit strong. In the living room, there was a mahogany bench, and the whole set of wooden furniture looked a bit old. An old woman was sitting on it, with shoulder-length white hair. She looked about 60 or 70 years old, wearing a gold ring and gold bracelet on her hand, and a gold necklace around her neck with an ice-green longevity rui. She was wearing a dark qipao, and her eyes were a bit white. Noticing their arrival, she turned her head and was overjoyed. "You're back." "Oh." The old woman was about to stand up and walk over. Song Yifan walked up, helped her sit down and said, "Mom, please sit down." Su Qianxi walked in with Li Xiqing and greeted, "Grandma." The old man was overjoyed. Looking up at Su Qianxi, his smile froze. "This is," she blinked and looked at Song Yifan. "Wait a minute." The old man seemed to have thought of something. He immediately stood up and walked into the house. Not long after, he walked out with a photo frame in his hand. Looking at the photo frame and then at Su Qianxi, the old man looked sad and said with red eyes, "Xian, are you Xian?" "Grandma, I'm not. After so many years, you really haven't changed at all. But how could you bear to leave my son? Do you know how Yifan has been living all these years?" The old woman's voice was a bit choked, and she looked at Li Xiqing. "Who is this?" Song Yifan hurried over and said, "Mom, you've got the wrong person. This is my daughter, Su Qianxi. She is the one I told you about. This is her husband, Li Xiqing. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.